morning and good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say how much I loved this doc, and I'm so looking forward to people being able to see it. So one of the things in the doc is you guys played this 21-night thing in London where you performed all your albums. And it was, months of you guys rehearsing. And I'm just curious if you still have PTSD from trying to put this on.
Absolutely, to the point where we'll never do it again. But I mean, every time I look back on it, in the abstract, it was an incredible thing to do, and something I doubt that any other band will ever do. But kind of thinking of the details of in particular, the preparation, the performances were just really exciting. But the preparation for it was, quite a long tour in Afghanistan, actually. So.
Edgar, I have to ask, because you had never made a doc before, was it tough to get financing? Was it, getting the money to make this?
It was a snap. No.
We just said, how much do you want? And
I've known of the band for since I was 5 years old, having seen them on British TV and that making an impact on me. And then this is in a pre-internet age where you can only rely on what you see and hear and maybe can find in the local library. I don't remember my small town having music magazines particularly. I don't ever remember seeing even the NME in my local newsagent. So following Sparks in that way was quite kind of like a riddle in itself, in terms of, I saw them on TV in 1979. I had a couple of songs on vinyl on these chart compilations. And then it wasn't until I was a teenager and I was getting into sort of David Bowie and Roxy Music and T-Rex that I'd hear these other Spark songs that were clearly the same band, but it wasn't the same genre. And it came before the ones I knew before. So I was properly confused. And then in the mid 90s, Ron and Russell had a hit in the UK with a song called When Do I Get to Sing My Way, which had a great video that was everywhere. And they were on TV quite a lot. And now I'm sort of truly baffled, because I was like, these are the same guys. What's going on? And again, it took me quite a long time to figure that out. And I guess, in more recent years, I say more recent years, in the last 20 years, with the internet and also with the kind of, I guess a run of albums starting with Little Beethoven, I was kind of more and more confounded that a band that had been going for decades was producing new music that was, as good as anything that they'd done, which isn't usually the trajectory of bands. Things seem to kind of tail off and sometimes get embarrassing. But that wasn't the case of Sparks. And so they felt like a real anomaly. And that started to sort of, my obsession with them started to build up to the thing where I wanted an answer to this. And I felt like they should be bigger than they were, but I felt the part of the thing that was holding them back was the sort of the context for some people. I knew people that I'd speak to when I'd say oh, are you into Sparks? They say, oh yeah, I want to get into Sparks. Where do I start? They've got such a daunting discography. So then that turned into a couple of things that happened. I'll just go through them really quickly. They're both quite funny. One, when I was writing Baby Driver, there was one afternoon where Michael Bacall, the screenwriter who just got filming with me, came into the office. And we were just chatting. I was running ideas past him. And we were talking about Sparks. And he knew one Sparks song, which was All I Ever Think About Is Sex from 1983. And I said, oh, man, you've got to hear this album and this album. And then as we were working, we were just playing a Sparks marathon all day. And then at some point in the evening, I thought, oh, I wonder if Sparks are on Twitter. So I looked at Sparks' Twitter account and it said, Sparks follows you. And I was because without really knowing Ron and Russell, just from their image, you kind of not entirely sure that they live on planet Earth. So to find that they do, and not only are they on Twitter, but I direct messaged Russell, who replied immediately. And I said, oh, is this really you guys, or is this a publicist running this account? He said, oh no, we really run it. And then I was even more bemused to find they obviously live in Los Angeles and live only 20 minutes away from where I currently was. So within 24 hours, I was having breakfast with Ron and Russell, which after years of loving Sparks was quite a kind of trip for me. And then I went to see a couple of shows, and it was at a show in 2017 at the El Rey, where I was with another fellow Sparks fan, Phil Lord, who Steve. And we were in the balcony and we were standing in between like Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols and Tony Basil of Mickey fame. And I was looking out at the crowd that were like quite diverse in their age, like between like 16 and 60. And I thought that was really interesting. And I said to Phil, I think the only thing that's stopping Sparks from being as big as they could be is this, if there was a documentary about them, they're like the best band who's never had a documentary about them. And I think if there was some kind of overview, it would really kind of like sort of let people who don't know who Sparks are the whole story. And Phil just said, you should make that documentary. And I was like, I will. And then I pitched it to Ron and Russell that night. They can tell you what their response to that was. But in terms of raising the money, I mean, one of the good things about this is that MRC, who financed it, had made Baby Driver, and they had just started a documentary wing. So I think they were quite surprised themselves when I held my hand up and said, oh, I want to make a documentary. So they were like amazing, kind of like sort of supportive of the idea and have just been with it from day one. So I wouldn't say it's been easy because we've spent 2.5 years making this, but they've been like sort of on board with the idea since the start of it. And, you know, and obviously I think as music documentaries go, there's elements of it that are quite ambitious. So I think I kind of just went into it as I would any other project. I knew it was going to be a lot of work, so I wasn't surprised, but it was still like, felt like really going on a little adventure. So that's a very long answer to a short question.
Ron and Russell, before you answer, because I do want you to answer, you have a history of movies and you guys not working out. So when Edgar, comes to the dressing room, whatever, and says, "I want to do a documentary," are you immediately like, "Yeah, sure, this is never going to happen"?
Well, we're kind of still so naive. I think in a good sense. I think that's what keeps Sparks fresh to a certain point, is that we're always agog at everything. So when Edgar did come backstage after the one show and propose this idea, we said, we both said this is fantastic, and I think we just said this one's going to be the one that's going to break the mold of our past dealings with movie projects that hadn't come to fruition. So, I think what was more the case was we'd been kind of hesitant in the past to even want to do a documentary about the band, because we always feel that what we're doing musically and the image of the band and the album artwork, all those sorts of things speak louder than what we can say about ourselves. And we were concerned that maybe it would be a lesser impact to know more about the band. And so, but when Edgar proposed this, we're such fans of his work and we know all of his films really well. And we thought that the sensibility of what Edgar could potentially bring and hopefully would bring to the documentary would be really complementary with what Sparks is. And we just wanted it to be something that was really, on the same wavelength as Sparks. And we knew from day one that Edgar had that was the case with Edgar. And we knew that would be the case because, just Edgar's films have music plays a part in a lot of them in a big way. And the sensibility that Edgar has in his films, we thought if he could bring, 10% of that into this documentary, we would be happy. But it was a case of us hoping that we would get a big dose of Edgar slapped on the documentary, and so we had no hesitation. I mean, it was the opposite. We were thrilled, and we just said, yes, let's do this. And here we are 2.5, 3 years later, and it's actually been done.
I'm curious if there was any sort of talk about not things being off limits, but maybe was there like any debate over certain like scenes certain things being included, or was it a very amicable edit with everyone just throwing flowers in the air saying it's great?
Well, I think the only thing that and this speaks to actually what becomes some of my favorite moments in the documentary, is the only thing that Ron and Russell said to me was that they didn't want to necessarily delve too much into their personal lives in terms of love lives and things. And then what I do think is funny in the documentary is those little moments where you can't help but not talk about it. And even where it's sort of you kind of have to not break character, but you literally break down in a sentence. I won't spoil it, but one of my favorite bits is where Russell is trying to say something in a diplomatic way, and Ron's smirk gets wider and wider to the point where they break down. And I think those bits are to me, I'm so glad that you guys let me leave all of that in, because that to me is the gold in a way. And so I think, I'll ask you this question, you had that one kind of thing that was sort of off limits, but then there is stuff in the movie that's gets kind of personal, but I'm very happy that you were on board with that staying in,
No, I think we felt that most documentaries you see about bands, there's always the angle of that's kind of obvious, oh, it's they were able to resurrect themselves from the huge drug problems they had, or drinking problem, and after rehab they came back, and isn't it a heartwarming story in that way? Or there's usually a built-in angle, and so we were concerned that we didn't have the drug problem, we didn't have the thing that the other brothers acts have of being kind of contentious with each other, so that couldn't be the angle either. So we were kind of thinking, God, does Sparks even have an angle? What is our thing? And so we were happy that Edgar, chose to have things where it showed not only the complete career and every period throughout the career, every single album throughout the career, but also treating them, where there were really positive things happening with us, and even the times when there weren't, great things happening for the band, maybe on a commercial level, that he also deals with those. And so, those might have been things like, oh, can you not talk about those? But I think that makes the documentary be richer, that it isn't kind of this just love fest for the entire career, that there's been no obstacles, everything's fine, we don't take drugs, the brothers don't hate each other. So what can you talk about? But Edgar, managed to make this story be we think it's a good story, whether it's Sparks or not Sparks, but just the idea of the perseverance, and through all situations and obstacles, that sort of story, we think it kind of maybe will resonate to an audience as well, and to people wanting to get into being in a band, or whatever the situation is, wanting to do some creative endeavor, that's kind of the story that there is.
There's really no heroism involved. First of all, we don't really have a choice. This is kind of all that we can do. And the other thing is, we've always felt that there's a mission that we're on, a cause, and we just really want to force that cause, in as strong a way as we can. So, those kind of moments where there is kind of a downturn, at least in some other people's eyes, that we just kind of plow on and try to put blinders on at those moments.
It's not too late for you guys to delve into heavy drug use. Maybe this is exactly the time to start.
If my vaccine appointment is canceled, I might be starting at that moment. So
this young kid's about to go south real fast.
Yeah. Well,
so you guys obviously have gotten along your whole lives. Has the biggest fight you've both had about has it been where to go get lunch, or have you actually had contentious arguments where you guys were away from each other for a week?
Well, I think
we have. I was just going to say it's usually kind of matters of within what we're doing working wise, very specific things like whether a song is worth becoming a part of an album or not, And there have been, in general, I write most of the material, and there have been some songs where Russell felt that lyrically, the lyrics, we always write the music first, and then the lyrics come afterwards, and that he felt that maybe the lyrical slant wasn't at the level of what it was musically, or didn't match the mood. So we get into discussions in that kind of way, but it's never at the point where we go sulk on our own for a week or two.
I could be wrong about this, but I want to say you've been on 14 labels through your career. And I am curious, which one was your favorite of the 14 labels?
Well, I have to give special credit, to Island Records and Chris Blackwell in the middle 70s. I mean, he's a very enigmatic figure, and he has such an amazing, at that time, that label was so special because it was an incredible combination of people. So, and also it was a label that took a chance on us, brought us to England. We had 2 albums out previously in the States, but we had no material to demonstrate to them. It was only their faith in what they thought we could do if we assembled a British band around us. So, I think, Chris Blackwell is a real visionary, and it is harder to find those kind of people nowadays, but I give, special credit to him.
After people see this doc, definitely people are going to want to experience your music in a way that they have not before. You have a lot of albums out. For each of you, for someone who's just going to buy a Sparks album, what is the album you want them to start on to get them into Sparks?
We can triangulate this. I think Russ will go first.
Oh, I'm first. Well, I guess reverting back to Ron's comments about Island, Kimono My House maybe is a good starting point, just because it sort of was the album that launched the band in a more visible way, and it had an impact on a lot of not only the public, especially in Europe, but also on other bands that were kind of youngsters at that time, and that saw the band on Top of the Pops, and kind of said, I want to do that sort of thing too when I grow up. And so it was pretty influential album. So maybe that one would be my choice.
Well, I'm going to pick, because I know where Ron's going to veer. So I'm going to pick Number One in Heaven, 1979, which is the album that Ron and Russell did with Giorgio Moroder, which is also not only like a drastic change of sound for Sparks to sort of change from a rock band into an electronic band, but also kind of so ahead of the curve in terms of it's the sound of the 80s in 1979. And in fact, the album was actually recorded in 1978 and sort of languished without a label to pick it up. So it could have been 2 years ahead of its time, but it really is an extraordinary album, and also just kind of like a lot of things in Sparks' world, just like a little bit ahead of its time in a good way.
I'm kind of an indecisive person, so I'll choose one of our compilation albums, New Music for Amnesiacs, which offers a pretty broad view of what we've done over time, and would give somebody, if they have the patience to get through the whole thing, a really good idea of a sampler of what we've done through the years.
Did you guys ever use the music that you were going to do with Tim Burton with My the Psychic Girl in an album, or is that music still dormant somewhere?
Yeah, it still exists, and who knows? Maybe one day Tim will re-enter the fold. But I'll be brief because I know we don't have much time. But Tim actually resurfaced after the original time that we had done that, saying, "I've been thinking about this project for years." It was still been in the back of my head. You still have the music? We met with Tim again, like that was probably was it 20 years after?
Yeah, it's probably 10 years ago.
10 years ago that we met him again after the initial period and then he listened to the music again and he said, yeah, it's everything that I had thought it was and had hoped for. Let's make this movie. And that was 10 years ago. So in any case, the music is still there. The project is still there. And you know, we like it.
It's been in development since 1991. So.
Edgar, true or false, you made this doc so you could hear the music that no one else has heard because you wanted to hear the My the Psychic Girl music.
I mean, not necessarily, actually. I haven't actually heard the whole thing. I mean, you know, it's also worth pointing out that as a little sort of, you know, the funny thing, like you said, about kind of like some near misses in film, that obviously this year there are actually 2 Sparks films, because there's my documentary and then Leos Carax's Annette. So actually, like, another Sparks musical has beaten My the Psychic Girl out of the traps. But no, I've never actually heard the whole thing, and now I'm thinking that I should.
We'll hook you up.
Yes.
Hook you up.
I'm basically out of time, but Edgar, I have to ask you an individual question. Obviously, I'm so looking forward to whatever you might be doing this year. What are you working on this year as your next thing?
I literally just before Christmas finished the Sparks Brothers and Last Night in Soho in the same week, which has never happened to me before. I've never worked on 2 films at the same time, and I've never had to literally sign off on both of them on the same day, which is what I did on the 21st of December. It was a very like weird day to watch Last Night in Soho at one facility like Dolby and walk over to Technicolor and watch the Sparks Brothers. So I now obviously we're doing the press for this. So I'm in this sort of period of just developing all the things that I currently am working on. And, you know, in terms of the world that we live in, I don't necessarily for sure know exactly what's next. So people, when they ask me about certain projects, I'm like, well, there's also the practicalities of how to make it in the current situation that we're in. But, you know, there's lots of exciting things that I'm sort of working on. So it will be one of those.
Got it. Listen, and I mean this seriously, congrats on the film. I know everyone's going to love it. I really had about 72 other questions. So when the movie is eventually going to come out, I hope we can talk again where I can ask the other things like animation, the editing. There's so many things. But seriously, congrats on the movie. I'm so happy I got to talk to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
So much.
Thanks a lot.
Cool. Have a great day and good luck with your speed dating.
Nice to see you, Steve.
Nice to see you. And seriously, everyone be safe.
Thank you. You too.